Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the Week 7 waiver wires. It's an important week as there are so many fantasy-relevant players on bye this week. It's the Byepocalypse, so you want to definitely check it out. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And today we are going to talk about the Week 7 Byepocalypse and what waiver wire steps you can take to help fill those roster holes, which I'm sure most of you have at this point. Now, before we begin, if you could please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, share this with your friends, and of course, subscribe. All those things really help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and I do very much appreciate it, so thank you very much for that. Now, let's get right into it. So Week 7, man, we've known from the beginning, this is the Byepocalypse. We got 6 teams on bye this week, and every single one of them is fantasy relevant for players. You've got the Buffalo Bills, the Dallas Cowboys, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, all not playing this week. Now, hopefully, last week you looked at what players were going to be missing on Week 7 and took steps to fill any holes that were caused by those players being out. So I hope you did that. If you didn't, it's going to be tough this week. There's going to be a lot of players that are going to be hard to get. However, on Wednesday, again, I say this every Wednesday, but especially this Wednesday, check your waiver wires for the players that were dropped because there could be players there that you can pick up. And maybe it's players that aren't playing on Week 7 either. That's an important thing. You might find some players off of these teams just straight up dropped onto the waiver wire, and they might be worth a pickup for after the bye. You know, Buffalo Bills defense has been extraordinarily good. Now, I'm saying this before the Monday night game where they're playing tonight, but I got to tell you what, man, if someone drops Buffalo Bills, pick up that defense. Get that defense, even if you got to use up a valuable roster spot. I mean, you could drop your defense and just take the Buffalo Bills defense because they've been so good. But that's the sort of thing you want to look at. So definitely check it out. So let's get right into it. So let's just start with the quarterbacks, and I got 4 names for you here, and the first one is Tua, who came back from injury, had a really respectable Week 6. He went, he got 33 completions on 47 targets, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. He earned a total of 22.36 fantasy points, and this week he gets Atlanta, who's also coming off a bye, but let me just say the Atlanta defense is nothing to be worried about, and I'm confident he's going to put up another acceptable performance for fantasy. 20-plus points, he'll be good for you for the week. I also really like Jameis Winston, who's only 37% rostered right now. And really, when it comes to what Jameis Winston has done, he's had 2 big weeks where he had multiple ridiculous touchdown totals. He had 4 on one and 5 on the other, so it made him look really good for fantasy. But his underlying numbers weren't great. But this week, he probably gets Michael Thomas back, and that will raise the level of this offense substantially by giving him another serious downfield target, an elite level downfield target, and I think that's going to help make him a more consistent fantasy producer going forward. Now, obviously, we got to take a look and see what happens on Michael Thomas. If he doesn't start this week, I would not start Jameis Winston, but if he does, I definitely would start Winston. So that's something to consider there. I also really like Sam Darnold playing the New York Giants, and I like Derek Carr at home against Philly. So these are all good streaming options for your fantasy team, or if you happen to have one of these quarterbacks that are out this week, they are good, suitable alternatives. So let's move on to the running back. And the running back is always the toughest position. So I'm going a little bit deeper than I normally would and trying to give you more recommendations than I normally would, just because you're probably going to need to pick up 1 or 2 of these guys. And it's going to be tough. Again, if there is going to be a huge demand for all these kinds of players. And so Just do what you can. Like I said, when I put in my waivers, I'm not just putting in a waiver for a single guy. Like the first guy I'm going to talk about, J.D. McKissick. If I really like J.D. McKissick, I'll make him my top priority on the waiver wire. But I'm going to put basically all these names on my waiver priority against the same player or against maybe the same two players, just so I have a chance to get at least one of them. So anyway, the first player, J.D. McKissick, who has been extremely inconsistent. There's no way around it. He gets nothing one week, then he gets a huge volume the next week, and it's just kind of switching off between that. Very hard to say what's going to go forward, but for a PPR league, I love getting him and playing him this week. He is, obviously you're really taking a chance here. He doesn't get much on the ground, but that's really not why you're playing him. He's a James White kind of player. He's a player you're playing to get that's going to get the targets. Last week he got 10. So that's great. That's perfect for fantasy. That's and 10 targets plus 8 carries, which is what he had, 18. That's over my 15 threshold. So that means he's good to go. He's a play. So you can definitely get him up and start him this week. They are at Green Bay. So again, that I would anticipate it's going to be a negative game script. It's going to be a game where they're going to need to take to the air a lot. That's going to favor J.D. McKissick over Antonio Gibson. So go with that. Next up, and this I think Chris Carson is going to be out until after their bye. So I think it's going to be another week where it's going to be Alex Collins and DJ Dallas. These are two guys that you need to look at. Now, DJ Dallas is the receiving back. Last week he got 5 targets, obviously not a lot of volume. So he got 5 targets and I don't know, it was like 4 or 5 carries. So he's underneath my threshold. But if you're desperate, DJ Dallas is only 2% rostered. So he's easy to get. And, in PPR, you could start him in a flex again, if you're desperate. But Alex Collins, also another guy who's only 60% rostered. You can check to see if he's available. If he is, I would definitely make him probably my top waiver priority. He got 20 carries and 1 target. That makes him an every week start until Carson returns. So he is also good to go for week 7. And of course, I didn't write down who their opponent is. I'm sorry about that. Now, the next guy is a guy that I normally never would recommend, but this is a week where you might need somebody. And in a standard points league, I think he's a decent choice. But Mark Ingram, who's only 32% rostered, I call him this year's Frank Gore, a guy with high volume, low efficiency, and a very limited receiving role. That's Mark Ingram to a T, but he got 18 touches and 2 targets last week. That's over my 15 threshold. I think he's good to start. They're playing at Arizona. That could be a problem, as it will most likely be a negative game script. But again, we're talking desperation here. You need to get guys into your slots. That sort of volume makes me say, okay, I could still start him even in a tough matchup. If you are really a gambling person, you could gamble with the Baltimore backfield. Obviously most leagues have Latavius Murray already rostered, but you've got Devonta Freeman at 2% rostered, and you got Le'Veon Bell at 7% rostered. Both these guys were decent last week. Devonta Freeman got 9 touches and 2 targets. Le'Veon Bell got 8 touches, and he got a touchdown. Of the two, I would say Devonta Freeman is the one you should pick up. He's below my 15 threshold, though, so he is going to be a very risky start. And it could just be that neither of them get anything, and it'll all be Latavius Murray. You don't know. Right now, it appears to be an even 3-way split, 33% each for these guys as far as their total, the total amount of usage that they're getting in this backfield. But it is a run-first offense, and Devonta Freeman was surprisingly efficient with his touches, which is, I thought he was a guy that was just done, but apparently he can do good if you only give him like 9 or 10 touches. But anyway, they get Cincinnati at home in week 7. So that's a decent matchup. Finally, we've got Romandra Stevenson, who was a guy that I liked preseason. I picked him up late in a lot of leagues, ended up dropping him in most of them. But his usage has been creeping up. Last week, he got 5 touches and 3 targets. So, again, he's not a startable guy, in my opinion, but you should definitely pick him up. And should anything happen to Damian Harris, I think he is going to be a great start. A late touchdown gave him a solid week for points. He got 15.2 points. But you can't read too much into that. When they get a touchdown on limited volume, it's very risky to bet on that again. They do get the Jets in week 7. That's a pretty nice matchup. He could see some increased usage during that, as I do anticipate positive game script for the New England Patriots. But that's the running backs that I would look to target this week. For wide receivers, I've got some good names here. Guys all rostered about 50% of their leagues. So these are guys that you have a decent shot of getting maybe at least one of them. The first one would be Sterling Shepard, who's only 52% rostered right now. Got a massive 14 targets. But again, it's more related to the fact that the team, he's the last man standing. That's basically what it comes down to. Everyone else is injured right now. He is the one healthy player. That means he's going to continue to receive a very generous portion of the targets. So he should be a definite start. They're playing against Carolina. I think it's probably going to be mostly a negative game script. That's also helps his usage. And I think that he should be your top priority target for this next week for wide receivers. There's also Darnell Mooney, who's only 44% rostered. Now, he is the number 2 receiver on one of the worst offenses in the NFL, but he does appear to have a very good connection with Justin Fields, which is nothing special, but he has been getting 5 or more targets in all but one game so far this season. Let's see here. Last week, I don't have his stats written down, but again, he's been getting 5, 6, 7 targets a week, so that makes him a decent player to go. Week 7 they get Tampa Bay. Obviously, negative game script. They're going to have to pass the ball more. I think he is the best target for Justin Fields on this offense. So I think it's going to be a good week for him again. So I would definitely try to get him. Finally, we have Christian Kirk. Now, Kirk has been very explosive with his very limited usage, and that's the problem. Is of these 3 guys, his usage is the most limited. Last week was a decent week. He did have a decent amount of targets, but he usually only gets about 5 targets a week, which is below my threshold for wide receivers, which is 7. That makes him a risky start, but they do get Cleveland next. Cleveland is really struggling right now. Their offense has so many injuries on it. It just seems to be that this is going to be the offense is going to be out on the field a lot because the defense is going to be able to shut down the Cleveland offense. So it should be good, although this positive game script could turn into a primary running game in the second half, which wouldn't be good for Christian Kirk. Again, he's riskier than these other 2 guys, but I still think he's worth a spot on your bench. And we'll see if he can carve out a bigger role. It hasn't happened yet. I think it's going to take an injury to someone like maybe AJ Green or something like that. Finally, this last guy I want to talk about, again, it's a bad offense, but he is doing really well with the volume. Amon-Ra St. Brown, only 23% rostered, got 7 targets in week 6. That makes it the 3rd week in a row that he's gotten at least 7 targets. That means he's startable in my book. I think he's good to go. He didn't do much with it. He got 5 catches for 26 yards and a 2-point conversion. So PPR, obviously he's a better option than non-PPR, but he is a guy that's getting enough volume that he can be worth it to put him into your flex spot, especially on a week like this. They do play the LA Rams, negative game script, more passing. I think it's going to be good for Amon-Ra, so I would go ahead and I would start him. Moving on, let's see here, the tight ends. So really, there's only one tight end that I'm really interested in this week, and that would be Ricky Seals-Jones. He's only 29% rostered, but he has maintained a very nice level of volume since Logan Thomas went out with an injury. And I don't know the status of Logan Thomas's return, so that's something to monitor. If Logan Thomas gets in a full week of practices this week and is going to be coming back, then I would not start Ricky Seals-Jones. But otherwise, I'd put Ricky Seals-Jones in again. He got 6 targets, ended up with 4 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. That's very nice. Obviously, you can't count on a touchdown with a light amount of targets like that, but I think he's a good choice. They're playing at Green Bay. Again, negative game script. Good for the pass catchers, so let's go with that. The other names that I think are okay. I mean, obviously, desperation starts if your tight end is out. But we've got Cole Kmet, who is 19% rostered, and Evan Ingram, who's 33% rostered. These guys are 5-target guys, so you're basically hoping for a touchdown if you get them. But if you can't get Ricky Seals-Jones, I would try to get one of those guys if you need a tight end. Finally, defenses, streaming defenses. Who are the good names this week? My favorite would be New England. The New England defense is only 59% rostered. They looked pretty good last week. I got to say they were fairly effective. And this week they get the Jets, so it's going to be that's a great matchup. I think they're going to be very effective. They'll be able to score some points, get some sacks, get some interceptions, maybe a pick 6. So they would be my top choice to pick up for Week 7 if you can get them. Also, San Francisco, who's only 47% rostered. Now, this defense has not done much this year. They've not been good in their first 5 weeks. Obviously, they were off last week. But they get a nice matchup against Indianapolis at home. Indianapolis has been playing a little bit better on offense. So it's a more risky prospect, but I think they would be a decent choice for this week. Finally, I really like Arizona. They're only 57% rostered, and they get Houston at home. So I think that's going to be great. That's going to be an extremely good defense to play for Week 7. So definitely get them. So that's it. That is all that's my waiver wire pickups for this week. Like I said, get some bids in on these guys, but then on Wednesday when they clear, go check your waiver wire to see who was dropped, because there could be some really good players there that could really help your team. And, basically your opponent just had no choice. They had to drop this player to make room because they got to bring on somebody to replace one of their starters. And this is going to be a week when there are teams with multiple starters out just because of the nature of all the teams that are on bye for Week 7. So that's something to consider. So thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I do appreciate you sticking out this whole video with me, and we will talk again soon. Good luck, everybody.